Hi,
Hey,
Brian.
how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Busy.
Yeah, right. Like,
Never
hey, yeah,
ends. How's
yeah,
everything going?
yeah, same. Good. And we're moving starting tomorrow. So it's just, yeah, one more thing kind of compounded, but it's great. So
Wow. Where are you moving to again?
just down the street, we're in Utah, but yeah, so we're just moving into a little bit of a bigger place because where we're at was meant to be temporary and a rental really full time. So yeah, and then we ended up kind of moving here quicker than we wanted to. Well, we really wanted to move here very quick. So here we are. Yeah. So
Nice. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, moving is not fun, but I don't know. Yeah, end up finding all the things that you can't believe you still hold on to.
right.
Like,
Yeah, exactly.
why do I still have this? And then my wife is she runs a home organizing business, so she's always involved in people's moves and deals with the emotional kind of ups and downs of transplanting
Oh
lives.
yeah.
Yeah. Hey
But
Scott,
Hey there.
how's it going?
that
Oh, not bad for a Tuesday.
Yeah, I feel that. You in that co-working spot or are you somewhere else?
Yeah, co-working.
Nice. Well, this should be a pretty packed meeting. We had 25 people register, so I'll give it some time and then we can probably get started in like 3 minutes, let's say. Yeah, Nicole, you definitely struck a chord with your question.
that's good. Lots of lots to be thinking about.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people are in similar positions. It seems like well, obviously there's a lot of solos in this community. And the good thing is that it sounds like a lot of them are seeing a need for extra capacity, right? So there's the demand out there. It's just now people are thinking about taking it to the next level, and that can mean a lot of different things. But I think one of the hardest things is considering bringing on new talent, whether that's staff members or lawyers. And lawyers are probably the trickiest of the bunch because it really changes the nature of your practice. And I speak with zero experience doing it. Which is part of the reason I like to get a lot of people together because everyone has different experiences, and I'm certainly not an expert, but I'll just be asking questions and hopefully we'll get some good ideas.
Great.
All right. What do you think? Should we kick it off? We'll give it one more minute. Let's see what we've got in here. Okay. All right, so let's kick this thing off. So we did a little, I sent a little form out. We had 10 respondents. And so I'll just quickly go over the stuff that I shared in Slack a second ago, or I guess 45 minutes ago. Just to give you a lay of the land of who's on this call and I guess the breakdown of lawyers in this community. Everyone is pretty much a solo. There's a few people who may join who are not solos. By definition, they're either at small firms or run small firms, but everyone on this call, I believe, is a solo practitioner. And essentially, we'll just define that. It's one lawyer firms. Some people have staff. It looks like 20% of the respondents have a non-legal employee. So that that's like added color, and it'll be interesting to see what that actually means, whether those are paralegals or assistants or part-time assistants. So we can dig into that in a little bit. And it looks like 70% of the people who responded are looking to bring on attorneys. So it means you're shop of one and you're looking to double your workforce potentially. So that's really cool. It means there's a lot of people who are seeing increased demand and want to think about how to scale their business and build their brand. So that's great. That's awesome. And a great signal also for people who have made the leap, right? And we're all kind of hoping that there's something to catch us on the other side. So one of the questions I want to get into is kind of, and we'll get into this when people start talking, but how long everyone has been doing this. I think some people just started, some people have been practicing on their own, more or less for a few years. Some people have been doing it for a long time. So that'll be interesting to see what the distribution is there. Let's see, 70% of the respondents also said they're thinking of acquiring or merging with another firm. So that could probably mean a lot of different things. And we'll talk about that at the end of this conversation, but could mean just joining with one other lawyer who runs their own firm. Or it could be a larger firm acquiring your book of business, or vice versa. So I definitely want to hear what people are thinking there. And then my last question was a little convoluted, but it said, the question was, are you more or less interested in growing without adding additional headcount? And I guess the impetus for this question is there is the potential now more than ever to scale services without adding people, whether it's through technology or kind of offshoring some work, or just delegating or referring out, and managing potentially with a lawyer who's not part of your firm. So I guess there's a lot of ways you can think about doing that. I think that question was mostly pointed at technology. But I definitely want to lean or talk a little bit about lean practices and what that would mean for you. So we'll kick things off. One ground rule. When you do start talking, please introduce yourself, because there's a lot of new faces here. Talk or give us a sentence about the type of law that you practice, so we get a sense of what type of lawyer you are, and then where you're located, if you want to disclose that, and how long you've been practicing on your own. So that'll give everybody a good sense of, like, who you are, how long you've been doing this, and so for context when you're providing your answers, inputs, or questions. So, and definitely let's dish the ball around a lot. I don't love talking, but I am unfortunately or fortunately the founder of this community, so I have to do it a lot. So let's start off with hiring. I think that was the big thing that Nicole had brought up originally. And so I do want to kick it over to you, Nicole, and just get a sense of where you are in your practice and what has brought about this kind of need or desire to bring on another lawyer, and what type of thought or thought process you've gone through, type of research you've done in terms of what you need to do in order to hire. So I have some questions, I guess, but want to hear kind of your story there, and then we can dig into that.
Yeah, thanks, Brian, and thanks for everybody showing up here to participate in the topic. I'm Nicole. I focus on healthcare, digital health, and med spa law. And I've been doing that for about 20 years. I was in-house general counsel at a national med spa chain for most of that time, and I branched out pretty much in January to start my own practice supporting other healthcare companies that are scaling, mainly scaling multi-state. And really one of the reasons why I've been looking to hire, I tried hiring and I still have that person helping. It's an offshore hire. That's a paralegal, about 20 hours a week. Very inexpensive labor, which is great, but it's been a little bit difficult to have them have some of the understandings around the intricacies of kind of the state nuances. And the practice that I've been working through, I'm kind of at capacity, and so really trying to figure out, where do I go next? And some of my clients, the challenge that I really have, and why I'm trying to look at potentially bringing on, an additional staff member. I'm on most of their Slack channels, and so that creates a whole other communication style and speed of which they have expectations of responses. And so part of my work is fractional GC work. And so I really kind of want to have somebody that can kind of help manage some of these communication methods, which I haven't been able to find AI that can do that quite yet. So really trying to look at, somebody that I could potentially train up, but along with that comes, is it the right hire? There's other types of tax disadvantages that I would be, potentially giving up adding more folks into my practice. And so just a lot of different types of questions that are going through my mind that I would really love to hear some stories about as well.
And this person, just a quick follow-up, would they be a lawyer or would they be just an additional staff member, or are you not sure?
Yeah, I think the level that I probably need is a somewhat, junior lawyer, who's just really good at some more of the, I'd say, entry level legal work of just, highly regulatory, like research questions, potentially being a first line of communication kind of into the firm to just kind of help with, some of the more entry level, kind of legal pieces, helping draft some documents. But yeah, I'm thinking, kind of a 3 to 5 year type hire.
Mhm. Got it. So I definitely want to open it up to the floor. If there are folks here who have gone through this kind of this journey, at least mentally, of, I need to hire somebody. What does that look like? Where do I find them? How do I search for them? How do I interview them, train them? If there are people who have thoughts around any of that, that'd be helpful. And also, I think sort of like an add-on question there is, Nicole, you mentioned like tax and sort of like entity probably advantages to being a solo. I'd love to know, if anyone is in the solo position would have to like really change the structure of their firm, because I think about that a lot as I think about what entity structure I would put together as a solo. So I am certainly not the most experienced person in this field, which is why it's good to get a lot of people with different experiences, but want to open it up to anyone who wants to chime in. And if not, I might call on somebody, because I think I know this audience really well.
I mean, I'll ask a question. Okay. Maybe I'll have a question. I don't have a comment, but I'm John Yao. I'm a former GC of a company, but my practice right now focuses. I've been doing this since February, and I am focusing on commercial lit and employment for startups right now. And the thing I'm curious about is, you talk about hiring someone. Nicole seems like, I mean, she didn't hire, but the first thing she got was a paralegal. I'm struggling with like the first help to bring on, whether it's a paralegal, an attorney, I don't know, an admin, I don't, you know, like what's the first thing you spend money on? Because I'm by myself now and I'm very nervous to, you know, commit whether contract or employment to anything right now that because, you know, I'm still figuring things out. So I'd be curious to hear what people are thinking about doing first before, you know, building the law firm of the future.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
where I'm
maybe
stuck. That's where I'm stuck.
maybe I can ask a question there. So it seems like there are challenges involved in hiring. What are the things that are blocking you from making an additional hire? Is it the fear of having an expense, like an additional expense and additional burn without yet getting the additional demand? Is it, I don't know how to train this person and delegate tasks. I don't have the bandwidth to do that. What are the things that that are stopping you from, say, bringing on a 20-hour-a-week person like Nicole did? Because I think, I mean, it's probably going to be different for everybody. But I think like the big things are, when I think about it for myself, it's bandwidth. I don't have the bandwidth to train somebody. I don't have the bandwidth to properly, effectively delegate work. And then there is that fear of, okay, I'm adding a fixed expense. And I don't know, you know, if I'm going to be able to drum up the demand to meet that, and make that return on investment makes sense. So are there any other like fears that I'm missing there? Are there any other challenges that I'm missing?
Brian, Nick
Yes.
here. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say one thing. This is Nick Robbins, I live in Phoenix, originally from Boston. My background is I've been in general counsel about 10 years, about 4 different startups. One actually public, it's actually LifeLock. And then I've been doing this for about 7 months. And I spent a lot of time in the product space as well. I guess to answer, just to maybe think about your question a little bit more, also the question for John, is I would think about it backwards. I would think about, and I'm kind of going through the same thing myself, which is why am I doing this, first of all? And then what do I want it to look like? And then kind of what problem I solve. And then in particular problem I solving with this person, right? It's like, am I at a place where like I can no longer, I'm at a capacity issue? Is it a weight issue? Yeah, I think like in any organization, the last thing you want to solve, I think, is with the body. And then you kind of want to say, is there anything I can do to get there without adding a body? Because adding a body adds way more complexity. But unless you're trying to become a big law firm, that's fine as well. Or medium-sized law firm. Just kind of depends, John, what the goal is. And then I would work back from that and put the tools in place. That's all.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't actually think about it from a fear. I mean, this is my own perspective, 100%. I think thinking it from a fear perspective, while it's valuable, you might lose some of the answer. That's all. If that makes sense. Like fear is important, but to me, it's like, what does it look like? And what do I need to do? And why am I not doing it?
Yeah. I mean, it also raises the question of whether or not you're excited about training people. I don't know what that looks like for you, Nicole. But does the concept of bringing on a junior attorney and really training them and giving them kind of like a different career path and being a mentor of sorts, if that's exciting to you, I think that's also an answer to your question, because you know, good leaders have to want to a certain extent lead people and help them grow their careers.
I think Tabitha said it right. She was like, it's like getting a new puppy, you know? So like, do you want to put in the time and energy of, you know, of getting somebody trained up on that? But I do think, you know, Nicholas had a good point, is it's, you know, kind of it is almost forward thinking of like, what do you really want to do and be, you know, as your practice? And I think that's where I'm kind of struggling is, do I just want to be Nicole's firm, right? And, you know, maybe, you know, figure out what other ways I can help, you know, some of the clients where I don't have capacity at the moment, you know, or is bringing on somebody else going to free up some of time, where maybe I can get an extra day of skiing in the winter or so forth. And so it's almost like that balance of, where do you kind of think the effort's going to be? And I've heard mixed reviews. I've heard some folks say, yeah, bringing on somebody can help then, alleviate some of your workload and allow you to do the things that you enjoy a little bit more, or it's the opposite because now you're babysitting and really trying to do that whole mentorship. And so I think that's really a little bit of the struggle.
This is Scott, and I would agree with that. I'm located in Des Moines. Before I came into the solo world, I worked in-house at AIG and Wells Fargo. Probably about 20 some years experience, and I decided I just wanted to do my own shop. So I'm starting a lot of fractional work, subscription-based work, and other things. But as I look down the road, and work is starting to come into the pipeline, for me, it's so much personality, it's so much fit. So it goes back to training, compatibility, for lack of a better term. And even though I'm not really thinking about an attorney or paralegal, I'm also thinking more back office to handle the bookkeeping, the billing, things of that nature. And for me, it's really just what can I add on, or what value add do they bring? And, for me, so much of this personality, because I'm solo, I work in a co-working space right now. So it's not as if we're crawling over each other, but it's really just, I think once you bring somebody on, then someone else noted, you basically bring on, open a can of worms with respect to how long you want to train them, how long you want to keep them around, and really, do they actually benefit your long-term goals? And, I'm maybe a bit of a control freak at this stage of my life, but I also understand that the clients I have, they come to me personally in many cases. And so that's where if I bring someone on, are they going to screw that relationship up in some indirect or direct fashion? So, that's what I worry about right now. And I'm overthinking it like most lawyers do, but that's what we get paid to do at the end of the day. It's overthinking paralysis by analysis in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess bringing on somebody is like, I guess what Nick was calling out earlier. It solves, you don't want to just try to solve problems with bodies, but you have to have a problem to solve, right? If it's extra bandwidth for actual legal work, and you have more clients coming to you, like Scott, you have a lot of people who say, Scott, I want your help. They don't want you to just pass on work to somebody else. You in a sense, you have to make a carbon copy of you and your look and your feel and your as a practice, right? You have to start to build Scott Murphy brand, so that they feel as though the lawyer that they're working with, regardless of whether it's you or your junior associate, they're getting what they're paying for, right? So that's a really heavy thing to do, and so you do need to you do need to lean into that. I guess it starts with hiring, like you said, the right personality, the right person. So I guess that leads us to at least talking a little bit about where are people looking for lawyers? Like, how do you even go about finding the right junior lawyer? How junior are you thinking? And that's that in itself is a really, I think, challenging thing. Do you go through a third party, or do you list a posting on LinkedIn, or do you tap into your network? Has anyone thought about that, or explored, or even gone down the path of interviewing people for roles at their firm? And does anyone want to talk about that, either through how they've thought about it or their experience doing it?
Brian, I thought from the slides, I thought no one had any employees.
Yeah, no one has. I'm curious if anyone has gone down. No one currently, who responded there has a lawyer on staff, but I'm curious if anyone has gone down the path of at least interviewing or collecting resumes or that process.
Okay. I actually can sort of answer that. Hi, everyone. I'm Arohi. I'm a lawyer I'm a California lawyer, and I'm also practice in India. I work a lot in transactional work, technology, data privacy, and I'm a fractional GC for a lot of startups. So most of my work sort of revolves around that and startup work. I actually have hired before because I started my law firm in India and then I sort of expanded out to California in 2020. And I did go through the whole process of hiring someone in India as well as hiring someone in California. California proved to be a little bit more difficult because I think the expectation of people who are getting hired, for me, the experience that I had, it was a lot more than what I was willing to take on. So their expectation, not just financially, but the kind of work, they were very demanding because I wanted someone who was an absolute fresh graduate. I was not looking for somebody who had a lot of years behind them. I wanted someone who's completely junior to help out with a lot more of the, basic, research work and all of that. And I went through the same process when I was hiring someone I have a legal company, and I went through a very similar process through that. So someone who has had gone through 3 years of law school, recently graduated, I realized that I wasn't ready to take on, I think, the bandwidth that was required for everything that they were expecting. I think that the expectations sort of just increased. And I went through that in 2020, and then I recently went through it again in 2024. I was trying to hire someone in February, and the expectation increased even more than 2020. So within the past 4 years, I've seen it's sort of skyrocketed, and not just in terms of financial requirements, but I think the expectation and attitude that everyone has towards what they think the role is going to be is a lot more than it used to be. So I think that makes it a little bit more difficult to hire. What I did realize, and one thing that did work for me, is I started hiring, and the thing that the person I ended up hiring was actually an LLM graduate who got their bar in California. So I ended up hiring them. So the benefit of that was that they needed an OPT for a year, and they already had a lot of training behind them. So it was much easier for me to sort of induct them into the practice. I hired someone who had transactional experience in France, and then he, wanted to get experience in the US, but wanted it to be, semi-remote. He just wanted kind of like a hybrid option. Ended up hiring him, was a great experience. And, it's still working out right now. He's part-time because he had some, family issues that happened, which he had to leave. But other than that, it worked out pretty well. And I talked to a couple of other people at different law firms, and they said that sort of format worked out for them well, because there are a lot of LLMs who go out without jobs, and they have a lot of experience behind them. Like if you pick up an LLM who's, done it from any university, they've got years and years of experience. I mean, I personally also did my LLM and I got my bar in California. So I had an idea of what the practice looks like, and I had a lot of people around me who had a very similar sense. And I saw how much experience they had, and I knew that this was a great place to be able to tap into. And their expectation for, salary is also much lower, which always works out. I mean, not that shortchange them completely, but again, their expectation is much lower. They need a job because they're looking for their OPT. And their experience is great. So, and they're learning already. They've taken a year to learn the difference between, their home country law and the US. So that for me worked really well. So I've done that twice now, and I have someone who's working part-time as well, who's an LLM. And for my legal company, I mostly just hire, LLMs and people who are practicing in a different country. So I think that's worked out really, really well for me. So yeah, long story short, LLMs work great.
Yeah, I want to jump right quickly on that. Yeah, I'm an LLM myself. I'm from Mexico, and I do believe that LLMs are overlooked by law firms. I remember when I was studying my master, these professors or firms were telling us oh, we're not hiring you. It's not your first language. There's no way we're going to hire you. We're not going to pay for you. So a lot of people that I've been practicing for 10 years. When I was doing my master, it was 7, and no firm was hiring me because they were they put me in a box that I didn't fit in. So I think there's a lot of LLMs that want to come here, practice. They've been attorneys for a long time. They just need someone that is willing just to how to draft a contract and understand that they're not American, but they can learn very fast, and they just have the the capacity and the excitement, and they want to stay here. So that's also overlooked. So I agree with what you said. Is there's a lot of us, so hire us.
Yeah. And can I tell you the benefit is also that if you get them from a country that has a similar like structure, if you get them from like a country that has common law, the structures, especially if you're a transactional lawyer, it is so similar that the learning curve is very low. So, I mean, that again was my experience personally from hiring people. The learning curve ended up being really low. And there was a lot that they got to contribute to the law firm. And eventually there was a client that, and again, this happened a few years ago, but there was a client that, this person was working with, and eventually the company needed somebody to be full-time, and they ended up hiring her, and she went on their staff full-time because, they liked her work and stuff. And she really helped me out, in my practice when I needed someone. So I think that might be a good place for anybody who's looking for someone to start off with, because they need someone, they're pretty proficient. You don't need to handhold them that much. And also the salary expectations are not as high, and they would be willing to do something part-time. So I think all in all, it ends up working pretty well, at least, for me. And yeah.
Can you just really quickly explain to somebody who doesn't really understand the OTP so you said OPT?
Oh, yeah. OPT, yeah. So,
OPT, whatever that
yeah.
part-
Yeah, absolutely. So what basically happens is, again, like I didn't experience this firsthand, because I was born in the US, but people around me were experiencing it. So when you go to law school and you go on your visa, what happens is that you have a year where you're given to work there. And after that, you can apply for your H-1B and your employer does it. So you have about 3 months after you graduate for you to find a job. And then after that 3 months is up, if you don't find a job, then you have to head back to your home country. But if you do find a job that, 3 months is extended to a year, you're able to work for that 1 year. And then, your employer, or, if you go and you're applying somewhere else, they ended up applying for your H-1B. And then that's like, you have a year where you can just stay in the US if you have a job. The other thing is that if you hire someone who was on an OPT and they do have to end up going back to their home country, either because you can't sponsor their H-1B, or, they don't want to stay, or whatever it is, you can also keep, employing them while they're at their home country. Like the guy that I spoke about, who I hired when, from France, when he went back to France, he was still working with us. Like there wasn't a problem with that. So it's very malleable, especially if you have a relatively remote practice, and it's easier. So that 1 year, that they'll be there in the States. But after that, if you apply for their H-1B and they get the lottery, all well and good. But if you don't want to apply for their H-1B and they end up having to go back to their home country, you can still, work with them, and they can still work with you. It's not a huge task to make that work.
That's really cool. The wheels are turning in my head right now. I mean, it's something, this is why I love these conversations, because I had no idea that it's kind of like a little arbitrage game, but it's also like meeting a need and because of remote practice and because of the situation that everyone here seems to be in, it might be a really good fit, or at least something to explore that many people didn't know about. So, awesome. Thanks so much, Arohi. That's super helpful. Any other thoughts around that topic, in terms of hiring? I'm gonna go back to my notes real quick. One really quick follow-up, I guess, and Arohi, maybe you can answer this because you might become the expert for this call, but you just volunteered yourself. But in terms of what's the right time to hire, I think we're all in that threshold period where we're in a window. We don't really know where it starts and stops, and when's too early, when's too late. You obviously went through it, so maybe you can speak to it, and then others if you have thoughts too. But yeah, what is the right time to hire? When do you know it's the right time to go out there and really make that commitment to bring somebody else on?
Yeah, absolutely. Just from a personal experience, I ended up having to hire when I started to realize things were, I think I hired a bit too late, because I realized that things were starting to slip, and they were starting to slip away. And what was happening is I like to be very hands-on when it comes to, outreach and networking and all of that. And I have work that needs to get done. So what I noticed is that every time client work was coming, my networking and outreach and research and I like teaching, and I go out and I do, lessons and courses, and all of that was taking a backseat. And I wasn't able to do that for months on end, because all I was able to do was the client work, and then the client work would stop immediately. And then I'm like, okay, wait, now I have 2 months and I have nothing to do because, client work is done. It's December and everyone's on holiday, and now I can go back and do my, whatever other work I need to get done. But as soon as the client work would come back, it would just be that I was able to do one or the other, and I was never able to be consistent with both. So, and client work obviously takes precedence, but because of that, all of my, outreach and networking and research and everything, that would take a huge backseat. So once I saw that started happening, and I saw that, it was getting very difficult to manage, and I was having to stay up all night to make sure that all of the work was getting done, all of the client work was getting done. It was, I think for me, I did end up hiring a little too late. So I think that when it starts becoming difficult to manage, and become exceedingly difficult to the extent of being impossible to manage both sides, where you're not able to manage the admin work and the billing work and marketing or research or articles or I think you need to get out there. The thing that is required to run your firm, and then you're also not, and keep that up with your client work. I think that's a good time to sort of be like, okay, I need someone to come on board, otherwise I'll have to start,
Oh, we might have lost her. All right. Maybe hopefully she comes back, but I do have a question, I guess, for the group in the meantime. Has anyone has anyone experienced that where I mean, I can speak, I guess, to my own experiences as well, but opportunities slipping because of your capacity issues. So like she was saying, working the client work, not being able to service inbound work or go out and do client development. I find that for me leads to spikes where months I am crushed with client work, and then months it's like the desert, because the clients I've been servicing have dried up. She's back, but Arohi, I was asking them if they've experienced what you're talking about, which is kind of the spikes of having a lot of client work, but also letting the biz dev side go stale a little bit. So curious if anyone is experiencing that. I imagine that's why many people are on the call. But maybe you're in that state where she was, where she said she hired too late. And so maybe it's a good idea to start doing what we're doing right now, which is exploring it. I see heads nodding, but sounds like Nicole, that's kind of where you are, to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that was kind of the driver of starting to think through this a little bit more, is really, how can I continue to give good quality work, while potentially also taking on more. I think where I also, am kind of questioning is, I mean, I have clients that are, all over the US, and I'm licensed in one state. And if I really want to service them in a broader capacity, I'm trying to even navigate, like, what is that? Where do I start practicing law in the state in which I'm not licensed, right? Which is like uh-oh. And so then, should I be going out and finding somebody who's licensed in the state to where I'm getting, a fair amount of interest for business? So that's also a question that's kind of on my mind, just around like the multi-state practice.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a good question. That actually dovetails well into, I think, the next topic, which is maybe you don't need to hire. I mean, I guess you could hire a employee to solve that problem and basically register your practice in another state. The other solution is obviously contracting that work out to somebody who's licensed in that state and doing some sort of fee splitting or of counsel engagement or relationship. And so I think that's the second area where it's in this employment umbrella, but not necessarily, or this, I'll call it scaling your practice umbrella, but isn't the traditional W-2 employment. So is that something that you have also considered doing? And also that question can go to anyone as well if there are thoughts around that.
Maybe I can chime in here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thanks, Philip.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Philip. I'm doing external general counsel work with a particular focus, all things corporate law, commercial contracts, US EU expansion, because I'm based in Europe, German background, but admitted in New York. And to me, actually, that solution of sort of finding the right partners to either contract it out or even make it a more sort of stable off-council relationship is really sort of the first step in that scaling exercise, because I think it's sort of flexible enough for me to not fear that I don't have enough, a full enough pipeline to basically give enough work to somebody who I owe a salary. And it also, in some ways, addresses the fact that as a sole practitioner, I actually enjoy, working with someone on a more a steady basis, sort of the collegiality point. One challenge I see with that approach is that really that the margin is relatively thin, right? I mean, because obviously, if it's sort of another sole practitioner or another lawyer of the same or a comparable seniority, they expect, comparable fees, and then yes, you can sort of agree on a certain fee split for your origination of the matter. But I think the margins sort of become much more interesting once you hire a more junior person and so forth. But still, I think before I have enough sort of comfort and confidence that I always have a full pipeline, it's sort of the more conservative first step to me, and that's why I'm trying to also address the jurisdictional fact that you, Nicole, alluded to. I'm trying to find sort of partners with complementary jurisdictional, admission or skill set to sort of take that baby step of a scaling exercise.
Mhm. Yeah, I wonder if there's a strategy there where you could find somebody to bring in an of counsel, or just like, a contract relationship in sort of like a try before you buy or try before you hire full time. And maybe you try to locate somebody who is also building their own practice, who might be a little bit more junior, or maybe they're not, but they're in maybe a less advantageous position than you are because you have the demand that they don't. And so I think there is like the natural evolution that if you're working with somebody a lot and you like them a lot and it seems to be working, you could potentially bring them in and then kind of merge firms or hire them. So that's, I guess an opportunity there to like test the waters a bit, like you said, without the commitment.
Definitely. And that's interestingly, I've been looking now into sort of, the ethics opinions around off-council relationships, and they've become much more, they've been liberalized. But you still need to, I mean, the risk is probably low, but you still need to show that you have sort of a constant, a permanent relationship. And one of the examples that are always quoted is actually sort of the partner in trial, that you're trialing or you're trying out whether you can, cooperate well together. So that's an interesting thought. Yeah.
That's cool. I'm gonna look into that. I did not know about that.
Yeah, Philip would love to hear, I don't know if there's anything to share around that concept, because that's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the off-council relationship nowadays seems to be the most flexible instrument you can. I mean, other than having just a contractor that's not really, disclosed to the outside, right? I mean, you can always obviously reflect in your engagement letter that you may, subcontract certain work and you stay, responsible for the end product or something like that. But if you also want to, and that's, to me, it's interesting, also want to have a phase to, put on your website, maybe as a colleague, then the off-council relationship is really the one that I found the most interesting. And reading these you know, both the New York Rules of Professional Practice in my case, but also the ethics opinions then on it. It's really very, very flexible. The only things that are excluded if it's only forwarding work, so it's only referring work back and forth, that's sort of not seen as sufficient a substance for an off-council relationship, or if it's only one-off. So you need a certain sort of, you know, permanent cooperation to justify the title of counsel. Then again, you know, who's going to question it, right? But there are some, I mean, the downsides are that there are some risks associated with it. One risk is imputed liability. If the off counsel, you know, works on matters independently of you, but appears on your website or your letterhead, their client, when they sue the off counsel for malpractice, may also, you know, mix you into that suit or into that claim and say, well, to me, it looked like, you know, you're off counsel, so you're on the hook. That's one risk. And that's why it's also good to, you know, first of all, have a written agreement and say, and make very clear that the off counsel, when they're working on independently of the cooperation with you on their own matters, that they don't use your joint letterhead and they don't use their off counsel title. And they only use it when they're actually working on matters that is, you know, within that off counsel framework. And it's also a good idea to, or actually really important, I think, to notify your professional liability insurance and say, I'm now going to work with off counsel. I actually just asked mine if that would change my premiums. And they say, for now, while your current sort of insurance period, the 1 year is running, we're not going to increase your premium, and they will be covered by your insurance when they work on matters for you as your off counsel. But in the future, come renewal, we may actually increase the premium, and let us know the names of these people. And that's also a point that I would and I haven't entered into one yet, but I'm really seriously considering now, something that I would reflect in the agreement with the off counsel. That sort of, you know, that liability question. That's one point, a big point, obviously, the biggest probably. Another is conflicts, that they have to clear conflicts. So if they have a conflict with a certain client they cannot take on because of conflict, then you cannot take on that client either. So conflicts are imputed as well. And there's really nothing to get out of that. So you're treated as if you're one law firm. But you'd be treated like that if you hired them as an employed associate as well, right? If they had a conflict, then so that's not a downside that you can avoid when you hire someone. It's just the same thing. But I think these are the two major the downsides. Other than that, I find it to be extremely flexible, with the one sort of caveat that maybe your margin will not be that great because, yes, maybe you're the person who originates matters, but they're still sort of, and sort of on equal footing with you, and will probably want a comparable hourly rate.
The imputed conflicts thing is something I heard a lot about when I was exploring kind of like different models for a law firm, probably like a year or two ago. But the concept, I think that probably the most important thing to think about as we all think about bringing on an of-counsel relationship is it's kind of like less risky if you're bringing on somebody who's running their own practice because they only have so many clients, right? And there's only so many conflicts you will impute. But if that person is of counsel for multiple firms, that increases the risk exponentially. So if they are of counsel for a firm that's like 20, one of these distributed law firms, like the one I am at scale, all of a sudden your conflicts potential has gone up tenfold. So it's probably best to look for people who are more independent, running their own firms, and don't have multiple of counsel relationships. Then your risk is really mitigated there. but that's really, really helpful, Philip. And yeah, it's something I just put a note to do a little research on the different rules in some of the bigger states of council relationships, because I think that's something we could all leverage. I do want to chat really quickly about what this community can do. I think I mean, we have some really great questions. A lot are unanswered, but a lot of really good new information that I'm going to run with and try to do some problem solving on my end to make your lives easier. Some of the things that I'm thinking about in terms of what Hey Council can do. First, I think there's a lot of people who have varying needs and are in different stages in their career or in their building their practice. And one thing I think, just take an example from like Y Combinator, one thing they do really well is they have like a matching or matching or speed dating thing for founders. So different founders with different expertise basically are in this digital room, and they can really quickly either meet each other or message each other to learn a little bit more about their practice. Like one person can post, I am a founder doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm looking for another person who's interested in founding a company that does something like this. And we could do something similar with the lawyers in this group. We're all kind of founders in a sense as well. So it's, I am a lawyer who's been running my fractional practice in this area for 6 months. I'm looking for another lawyer who's looking to do this type of work, or might be able to supplement my practice, or may be interested in joining my practice. And that could be, we have a community of 200 lawyers. It could be a really good kind of network for finding that extra person or that extra bandwidth to help or to give you extra work. So maybe that's something I can think about, the structure, how to do that. We already have the bare bones with everyone's kind of like member profiles and stuff like that. Maybe we can add a few things, at least in that directory, and then add people to a channel where it's all about kind of that exact thing. The co-founder of a law firm matching process. So that's an idea. I don't know if that sounds like something people might be interested in, but you can give me your feedback later. I got one heart
Yep.
from Fernando.
Brian, I
think it's
just oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I just was gonna say it's a great idea.
Yeah, I like it. I was gonna ask Brian, I think maybe you're still working on the directory piece, but that would be helpful, like, to the extent that anybody's sort of looking for a specific like type of lawyer, or I need somebody in that state, or just to have some information about what their practices are, what states they're in, and maybe what their billable hour rates are, and maybe what they would be willing to accept outside work at. That would be helpful, because sometimes clients have needs that I can't do all the things, or they're in a different state, whatever, and it would be really helpful to be able to kind of sort and figure out like who's doing what and for how much.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I wonder how many people participate in like stuff with that much I guess information, kind of like billable rates and hours. I mean, I think, as people are somewhat guarded about that, but maybe not. I mean, maybe that's old way of thinking. I wonder if we could do like little flags that at least show what that lawyer is interested in and why they're here. So like, I'm looking for another lawyer. I'm looking for enough counsel relationship. I'm looking to expand my firm. I'm looking to join a firm. Maybe there can be little kind of like icons or flags, so that you can look in the member directory and see who is looking for what. But yeah, let's turn this into an exercise. Maybe I'll spin up a channel and we can all kind of brainstorm what that looks like. Rashab is an incredible designer and can spin things up pretty quickly, so it'll be a fun little experiment. Cool. And then I think some of yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, real quick question. Does anyone other, and maybe we can just, signal it here, we don't have to discuss it, but has anyone had experience with taking on an off counsel, or has it been off counsel to others? I think would be really interesting to hear that.
Yeah, I'm of counsel of like 4 law firms, and for me it works really well. I love it. It's very interesting to see how like law firms work separately, and as you can tell, like some are more organized, some they don't have time for you, like, and I think it's a balance. I think you need to be very transparent, and you need to like, like how you bill and all these little things that like you don't know that are very important for an attorney that is like you're bringing on board are like have this fundamental for me. Like even like doing BD, right? Like if I like your firm, for me, it's like I can supplement my like practice with you and I can bring you clients. But if you don't bring me in, you don't explain me how you work, where are you looking, there's no incentive for me to help you. I'm not just gonna do some work for you, but that's it. So that I think that's very important. I don't know if I will hire, but I think working and meeting attorney and like I work with an attorney that I don't know in person, and I've been working with him for like 4 months, and we use Telegram, and it's been like, oh, I need this, I need this, I this, it's just been like that. And if I have questions, I reach out, and people have different ways of doing, but being very clear, being transparent, just like you don't have to be a mentor, yeah, but it's like, oh, you're willing to help me. I'm going to explain you why I thought about this more in a remote environment when you're not having conversations all the time. Like if you're like drafting an agreement, if you make comments, like explain me why you did this. So I stop pinging you on that, so like there's a lot of things, but it's cool.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
I've also worked as a of counsel, and I've to your point, Philip, it's been a lot more like, and I've loved doing it. I mean, I love working as an of counsel. It's really fun. Exactly what Fernanda just said. It's really fun and dynamic, and get to meet a lot of different people and get kind of work that you possibly wouldn't have gotten if you were just doing it yourself. It's the best I can compare it to is kind of like being a fractional GC for another firm or for a solo practice. It's similar to what I do with another legal company I work with, but it's sort of like doing that. So exactly what she just said, you have to be transparent, and you have to make sure that you understand what they want, but you also have to be willing to like just dive in and do the work. So I've done it mostly for people who are working in like transactional work or data privacy, trying to build compliances, product counseling and stuff like that. But it's kind of been like that. And to Tabitha's point about the costing, and the fee and wanting to know that and all of that, I think that's really helpful when you're an of counsel, because what I've realized it's helpful to be is, okay, you know what, this is the amount that you're going to be taking from your client. And suppose like if somebody's billing, $350 an hour, if you come and you tell them that you're going to be billing the same amount to them, or you're going to be billing even 250, they're going to be like, well, that doesn't really make sense for me. And that doesn't really, that's not something that I can really do, because it kind of defeats the purpose of you wanting to give it out while also retaining some of the profits. So I think being very clear about that with the person you're working with is very important. Being like, okay, you know what, I bill this amount and I'm willing to give sort of this as a margin. Does that work for you? And then the of counsel can be like, yeah, it works for me. I would like a little bit more, or, if you give me this amount of work, I can even do it in a little bit less. So I think that sort of transparency when you're talking to somebody about being an of counsel or working with you, that really helps. Like that's something that I've learned. And as if you want to be an of counsel, being adjusting to what other people are saying, I think that's also really important, because I personally love being an of counsel. I have the most fun with it. I really, really love it. It's like being a fractional GC, and it's super fun. So what I try to make sure is that, okay, if I want to work with someone and I know that there's a particular budget that they're looking for, just being willing to, I think, fit into that budget is really, really important. So yeah, that's sort of been my experience with it.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Awesome. Lots of good stuff here. I think my takeaways right now are, it seems like we have two different buckets we'll throw things into. One's the of counsel relationship, and what's kind of like the meat behind that, and what tangible steps can you take to create an of counsel relationship. So I think I may drill down into that. Maybe I bring on a small panel maybe in the next month to just dig into that and have a little bit more of a structured conversation around a lot of the questions that were brought up today. And then I want to do the same thing for hiring W-2, because I do think if we try to spend the same time talking about both, we'll get mixed up and distracted. So I'll do one about W-2s and what are the processes of hiring a W-2 and how the hiring process should go, because that's obviously a bigger investment. But I think the first one, the more immediate one, because that's the position a lot of us are in, more realistically, is of counsel relationships. So we'll do something there. I'll also spin up the YC styled speed dating thing for lawyers, or like, you know, whatever we end up calling it. I'll start that as a channel, and then we can do some initial designs, get some feedback, and see how that works. Anything else that you think would be helpful that potentially the community can help with, or, you know, I can help with?
Brian, just two things. One on the W-2 piece, worth considering whether or not people want to actually have organizations that are set up to do payroll. That's just another piece to that. Like if you're gonna do W-2, you're gonna be taxed and set up, not like a pass-through LLC. The other one, just kind of me personally, is I'm really trying to figure out how to spend less time on hands-on keyboards and more time kind of talking to people, resolving big problems. Because the hard part about what I was saying is you meet with founders, you meet with companies, and you're helping them solve these issues, and then you have to kind of revert back to doing word processing, and that's just kind of the time stuff. And that's where I am. It's like I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, I could hire someone, I suppose, but really, what tools am I missing? Am I not using to make the workflow easier? And then once you've maxed that piece out, then I say to myself, okay, once I've maxed all that out, that's when I can think about having someone.
We should.
So I'd love to hear the technology pieces.
Yeah, we should. That was one of the things I really wanted to get to, but we really I think we got some good information on the human side, hiring humans, but I do think we should talk about like the optimal tech stack to reduce a lot of the workflow that we all see as fractionals. There's definitely so much good stuff out there that can take stuff off of our plate. So maybe so that's a good takeaway. We'll just maybe do another hour session at sometime in the next month to talk about that. Tabitha, I know you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I want to second that. That was exactly that's where I was going, because I'm at this spot where I'm trying to figure out like, which systems to implement, and it would just be really helpful to know like, oh, I tried that and it sucked, don't do it, or like, oh, this has been working really well. And especially as we're kind of thinking about like integrating with other people, like how do I deal with their timekeeping? Do they just give me an invoice? Like it would be just helpful to know like how integrated do these things need to be? Like what's the sort of best path to scale from like 1 to 5 to whatever? Like what are the things to avoid, and which sort of systems should I have in place sooner rather than later to avoid problems?
Yeah, and I would like to, over the next like few months, especially after demo day, when we get to see a lot of these like startup legal tech startups pitch to us, will be a lot of fun. Kind of take an opinionated view on what is the ideal tech stack for the solo practitioner. Part of that is our team and us as a group curating for ourselves, like what we've tried, what we like, what doesn't work, what works. And that will be like a fun ongoing conversation we can all continue to have. But I know Christian is like very into this topic and probably has a lot of ideas. Maybe Christian, you and I can come up with a good idea for a more, my dog's going crazy, a more structured talk about just that, the perfect legal tech stack for the solo. And we can do another panel on that. So I got some homework, I got some things to plan, but this is awesome to do, just like an unstructured community conversation. So big thanks to everyone who is here and also who participated. Arohi, thank you so much for your expertise. Nicole, Philip, Tabitha, Nick, and Fernanda, everyone who and John, everyone who talked, and Scott, whoever, everybody, thank you. But this is recorded. I'll send notes afterwards and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.